Yes, I can see your screen.
Good. Okay. Just wanted to check. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cassie. I am the Director of CCFP and Summer Food Programs here at the state. And we're just going to kind of go through the application. We have some pretty significant changes for some of you and others, depending on the type of institution you are, maybe not so much. So I will go through all the things that apply to everyone first. And then we have some specialized forms for certain entities that I'll let you know when they only apply to you. Because we have a good mixture of all kinds of different folks. I think we have multi-sided, we've got family daycare home sponsors on, and just some independent daycare centers. So we've got a good group. At any time, you guys, please interrupt. Speak up in the chat. You're welcome to unmute yourself and interrupt me if you have questions. That's what this is for. We're going to go through every form. So some of it might be redundant, things that you're already aware of. But if not, just, like I said, interrupt me when you have any questions. The first thing I want to go over, and keep in mind that my screen might look a little different than yours because I'm logged in as myself, so I kind of have extra buttons that you might not have. And I might be able to type in areas that you wouldn't. So that's why it might look a little bit different. But I wanted to go over really quickly on the business maintenance page. This is one of the most important areas that you guys need to make sure you're keeping up to date at all times, because this is the information that we have to be able to contact you. So on this page, it tells us, your mailing address, your physical address, and then also where your records are kept. And generally, those are all three the same thing, but sometimes they're not, especially if you're multi-sided. You might have a central location where you keep your mail or your records. It is important that we know where that location is because it does have to be approved, and that's where we're going to go to conduct your review. So make sure that that's accurate. We do have some exciting changes that will be coming for the contact information. They're just not quite ready yet. So probably here in the next few weeks, expect this area to look a little bit different. We're going to make it where we have a section just for the owner, executive director / superintendent, whoever that primary responsible person is. And then we'll have a separate section for authorized representatives where you can put more than one person in there. So many times we're dealing with more than just one person in these institutions, and we need to make sure that we have the right contact information for everyone. So be looking for that to happen. When you see a new section pop up here, just be sure to go in and update it. We'll send a mass email out when it's ready though, but it won't affect your application approval or anything. Something else that's very important on this page is that right here at the bottom, is listed your fiscal year, and we need to know what your fiscal year is. We operate on the CCFP on a federal fiscal year, as you know, which is October to September, but we need to know what your fiscal year is because that's what you're supposed to be reporting all your financial information on that year to us. So if these months aren't right, chances are that's what was put in there when you first applied, because if I'm not mistaken, defaults to these months because of ours. Make sure you have the right months here. Schools are going to be July to June. A lot of our smaller daycares are just going to be January to December. It's whatever your 12-month fiscal year is when you close your books. That is what we need to know. Other important piece of information on this page is where you can find who your assigned office and field staff are. In this training today, I've got Karen and Lisa and Jennifer all here standing by helping with questions. And before we get off here, I'll give you their email. But depending on who's listed here, it'll be one of those three. Unless you're brand new, you might have my name in there. That's who you need to reach out to when you need help. So it's important to know who that person is. Okay. So if you're not familiar, when you go into your applications, if you haven't already inserted your application, you'll just put 2022 and add it. And it should populate the new application. The first form here on the top of the checklist, it's not new, but the name has changed. In years prior, it was called the application questionnaire, and it just had, I think, 5 questions on it. And if you have logged in and looked at it, you'll see there's many more now. The first 5 are exactly the same as they've ever been, but you'll see we've added 6 through 22, basically. These questions that we've added all tie back to VCA, which we've been talking about over the last year or so. If you've not heard that term, you might not have attended training, or you've fortunately not been seriously deficient, or you're not brand new. Where do you add the application? So if you don't have any applications showing up, let me back up. You go to applications, and you're either going to have, if you're brand new, you might not have anything here, or if you're existing, you don't have your prior ones, and you'll type in 2022 and click add renewal. So going back to the questions on the VCA, like I said, some of you are brand new participants, have had to fill out a separate document before they get approved. Our serious deficiency institutions, anyone that's been seriously deficient throughout the fiscal year, last year had to do this, and we'll have to do it this year. It's a completely separate document. But we're gradually incorporating all these things that we need to be collecting on application renewal and when brand new participants come on. So the first question we've added here is, please explain your procedures that ensures the integrity and accountability of all CACFP related expenses by ensuring CACFP funds are used for allowable costs and that expenses are supported by source documents such as receipts, invoices. These questions are going to sound harder than what they are. What we're looking for in most of them is we just need to know what your policies and your procedures are for operating the program, and just to ensure that you know, you're doing everything per regulation. So this first one is just when you need to tell us, how are you ensuring that you're documenting your allowable costs and expenses? Like regs tell us you should be. We provide everything you need. You might have something that's better than, like we provide the expenditure worksheets and things like that, the food purchasing forms, which that might not apply, that some of those may not apply to everyone here, like our family daycare homes, but you have the expenditure worksheet. You might have other sources, electronic or computerized systems that do all this for you, but we need to know when you're making any purchases or you know, incurring any costs, how are you documenting those? And then we need to know about what kind of accounting method you use. This one kind of trips people up because most of you just, as you have a cost, you pay for it. When you need to go buy groceries, you go buy groceries and you pay for it. If you're doing that, that's accrual. That's just paying for it as it's due. Okay, so if most of you, if that's how you operate, that's what you're going to put. But even if you don't know the name for it, explain to us how you make your purchases. If you just pay for it as you get the bill, then that's what you need to record. But keep in mind that all your expenses have to be recorded in the month in which they occurred. And you all should know that. So when you're filling out your expenditure worksheet, your expenses and your income for that month should be in that month, regardless if you paid it in a different month. Which is how it works for most of us. You know, you have your utility bill that we'll get, you know, here in September that applies to August. Even though we pay for it in September, it was an August expense. And this just goes on asking, kind of reiterating what I've already said, but you just have to clearly state, you know, what, how you're going to record when and how that cost was incurred. This is where you'll mention if you use an accounting software like QuickBooks or ProCare as one that a lot of our daycares use. Minute Menu would be one for our sponsors of both centers and family daycare homes. What are you using? Even if it's just, if you keep an Excel spreadsheet, that's great. But if not, you can just say NA. If you're just utilizing all of the forms we provide you and nothing really electronic beyond that, then that's fine. We need to know who's responsible for developing your budget and who's responsible for reviewing it. And then making sure that your actual expenses are reflecting what your approved budget is. And we'll talk a little more about the budget later because we've made some pretty drastic changes and good changes to the budget for our independent institutions this year. But it's important for you to know that your budget right now is just a projection. And it should be kind of based on what happened last year. If you're renewing, that's easier. For brand new ones, it's kind of tough. You're kind of just making a guess at what you think your expenses will be. But as the year progresses, those things are going to change. So you should always be updating your budget as things are changing. So keep that in mind that it's important that your budget closely reflects what's happening in real life as closely as possible. Because when we come out and do a review, we look at that. We look at what's approved and we look at what you're spending. And then it could be some bindings if those things aren't reflective of one another. 11 talks about we need to know who in your, which personnel in your institution has CCFP responsibility. So if you have more than one site, we need to know who those responsible people are. The only exception for this would be family daycare homes. You know, all your providers, they are all responsible entities to make sure they're doing it right, but you don't need to list them all because you have a separate site application for each of those. The difference would be for multi-sited institutions of centers. Sometimes it's hard to make sure we're pinpointing the right person. So we need to be able to know who's responsible for doing the paperwork at each site, who's responsible for doing the cooking at each site. So make sure you're listing out those individuals here. It should be reflected on the application too, but sometimes we just don't have enough room to capture everyone. These boxes, you can make them a little larger. I can't remember the character limit we have, but it's a pretty, you can type quite a bit in here. List the person who's responsible for hiring. That's important just to make sure we know who's the main one, head honcho. You know, we got to know who's the main one in charge and doing the hiring. The one that's doing who's doing training is down here. But when do new personnel receive training? That's important. It's kind of a tricky question because a lot of times when I've gotten these VCAs, they'll have a response like, they'll get it within 90 days. Well, that wouldn't be an acceptable answer if you hire a person and you have them serving meals on the first week of their employment, but then they don't get CACFP training for until 90 days later. The right answer to this one is they will have training on CACFP duties prior to having any CACFP duties. That's only the time that a person should be doing anything CACFP related as if they've been properly trained. And then you have to do it annually, as you know. And then list the person who's responsible for training those new personnel. Please describe your institution's procedures for ensuring that all meals served comply with CACFP meal patterns. This question would apply to all of our institutions, whether you're independent, at risk, multi-sited centers, family daycare homes. You've got to have procedures for ensuring that the meals that you're being reimbursed for have to comply with CACFP meal patterns. Please describe your institution's procedures for collecting family size and income applications and CACFP enrollment annually. This applies to most, kind of. So all of our just regular independent daycare centers, you guys have to do that every year. You have to get the new income applications, which now is combined with the enrollment. It's one form. That has to be done every year. Do you do it every October? Do you do it when we release the new one in July or August when they come out? We don't care when, as long as every year you're renewing it. Same thing for your multi-sited. What's your procedures for that? And if different sites have different procedures, put those notes. If you're a Head Start in here, you might not be having to do applications, but you have to do enrollment. Make that note. Make that note that FSIAs are not applicable to you, but this is when you collect enrollment. At risk, if we have any at risk in here, neither of these apply to you. So an NA for an at-risk only institution would be the only one here on number 16 that would be acceptable for, because enrollment nor FSI are required for at-risk. Family daycare homes, y'all kind of have a little trickier way you collect when they not enrollment, and not everyone has family size and income applications, but you have a method for how you're collecting on those that do. So be as detailed as you can. Please describe your institution's procedures for maintaining daily records to ensure the number of participants in attendance and daily meal counts are collected. Everyone should be able to have a good answer for that. How are you maintaining your records just to make sure they're accurate? For some of you that's multi-sited, family daycare homes and centers, you're doing that through your monitoring. You can't monitor their paperwork every day, but you're doing your required on-site monitoring or the desk reviews while that's allowed during COVID. But that you need to explain your procedures for how you're doing that. And then also detail how you're maintaining your own records. Not only are your providers and your sites to maintain records daily, you have your own kind of records that you've got to be maintaining. Describe your institution's procedures for ensuring that claims are processed accurately and in a timely manner. This is so important. Our claiming schedule or our payment schedule has changed a lot over the last 10 or 15 years, ever since everything went electronic. I remember way back when I was on your side of the fence and I was submitting claims, we had to have it turned in by the 10th, and we only got processed a certain day, one time a month. And if we didn't get it in by the 10th, then we were going to be late and we'd have to wait till the next month. Going electronic and being able to make payments that way has made it all much more convenient and easier for us, that we're able to pay every week now, with the exception of the last full week of the month, which is when we reserve for federal reports that we have to do. So even though our policies and in your agreement, it still says it's due by the 10th, we would really like and strive for you to get it in by the 10th, because it helps us. It helps us with our reporting and making sure everything is as accurate as it can be by the end of the month. But if it's not submitted by the 60th day, it's late. So that's regulatory. But we still say, please get them in by the 10th, because it helps us. But as long as they're submitted by noon on a Tuesday, and it's not the last full week of the month, you'll, Lord willing, be paid on that Friday. We all know things happen and sometimes systems fail us or other things out of our control, but that is generally our payment. So tell us how you're going to ensure that you're going to get those in as accurately and timely as possible. This one's about how you're maintaining your original records. As you know, you have to keep the current year plus 3 past years. So tell us how you're keeping those. Tell us in detail where those records are stored and list the people who have access to them. And something else that I should mention is, especially, in most of these institutions, especially right now, staff sometimes can be like a revolving door. People are coming and going constantly. So you have to be mindful that if you're listing people here and their names and titles, which is required, and that person leaves and you have a replacement, you've got to update this document. Because when we come out for a review, we're going to be looking for these people and these things that you have listed here, and it needs to be reflective of what's really happening. So we need to know exactly where your records are and who has access to them. If they're in, the green file cabinet behind your desk in the front office, and only you and your assistant director have a key to it, that's great. We need to know that. But make sure you understand that you or that person need to be there at all times, or whoever has access to them, because unfortunately, if we can't access your records, you would be found seriously deficient. I mean, it has happened that folks have been terminated simply because they weren't able to retrieve the records from a locked file cabinet because the person with the key was not there. So it is important that we know where they are and who has access to them. And these last two kind of go along with one another. The answer to each is probably going to be the same, but it's kind of two separate issues. So in the event that you ever have to repay a debt to us, which is probably going to be because you've had a review and you had an overclaim, which is not uncommon, which should not make you worry if you're new or if you're renewing and it's never happened. If it hadn't happened to you yet, it's going to, not a big deal. Mistakes are made. Or you might have found your own mistake and need to do a revision. So what other money do you have to repay that debt? Although we do take any overclaim out of future payments, and that's in our policies, that's if you're ever SD or something like that, or even just non-compliant, your letter will come and say you owe this amount, and we'll take it out of future claims. The right answer for these for 21 is not, you'll let it come out of your claim, because it's regulatory that you cannot pay for CACFP debt or bad debt with CACFP funds. You have to have some supplemental income to support that. And the reason we can get around that is, okay, so we're taking out of your check. Well, you have some supplemental funding somewhere else that's going to cover the loss that you will experience from that overclaim being taken out. And then 22 goes into talking about you have to have adequate resources for daily operations without the use of CACFP funds. That is regulatory. Before you ever even come on the program, you have to show that you can operate this program without the funds, because it's a reimbursement. So daycares, you already have to be providing meals. And generally the meals that the menus you have to create for DHS are kind of congruent with what our meal patterns are. The purpose of this program is to help you increase the nutritional value and provide better foods during meal services that you're already providing. So we need to know what funding you have to do that. If you're multi-sided, and you depend on the administrative costs to operate. And this applies to family daycare homes. It applies to everyone. Whatever it costs to operate daily, if we aren't able to pay you for a month or two, I can't say that that's ever happened. It hasn't since I've had anything to do with CACFP, but it's not to say that it can't or that it will. But if it did, what funds do you have coming in that you can use to operate while that happens? And be prepared for whatever, like if you're a daycare and you put it's your personal savings, like we don't want that. We don't want you to have to use your personal savings, but you've got to have a backup. When we come out and do a review, we're going to need to see that documentation to show you really do have a positive balance. Or if you put it's credit cards, you have so much money in credit cards. We don't want you to charge up your credit cards, but if you had to, we have to see that there is an available balance for that. So just be prepared for that. And then the last new thing on this form is this little attestation statement. We've had some confusion in the past about when applications are due and then what month you'll be eligible for. So basically, to simplify, we're just letting everyone know that in order to be eligible from October 1 on for this year, you have to submit by October 31st. We cannot backdate applications to a month prior to when it was originally submitted. And we've added something new on the checklist, and we'll show you that when we get to it after a while, that will help us retain that original submission. So you have to check and say you understand that you will only be eligible to claim October if you submit in October. We just cannot backdate to prior months. One thing I want to make sure here on number 5, if none of these things are applicable to your institution, you have to put an NA. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa. Is it on the first 3 or all 5 of them? You have to put an NA. Oh, so if you make a selection, yes or no, you have to have something over here. Okay. Okay. Okay, so it does work like the instructions say. Sometimes our forms don't always work ideally. So if you do click no, you have to have something over here, or you'll keep getting an arbitrary error that won't let you submit the form. Any questions on this form? Okay. Funds received, nothing about this form has changed. Oh, that's a lie. I don't know why I said that. I was looking at the meal policy. Funds received, we did change some on here. And disregard that error. I get a weird error because I'm in a test environment. If you can't find your application, that probably means that you're brand new. So if you'll go back to your return to Fiscal, I'll do it real quick. You have access. Do what? Yeah, I'll show you real quick to get to it. You'll go to applications and you'll go down here. I've already done it, so you'll type it in and click add. Okay, sorry. Funds received. We did make some changes. Nothing that should be painful. It was kind of to help you guys, give you a little more instruction on this page. So if you recall earlier, I went on about the fiscal year and we didn't know your fiscal year. It is important for us to know what fiscal year you operate on. This page is what you should be reporting your fiscal year information. So my pretend test hop account, we run on October, September, at least that's what it says. If you get here and you're like, well, that's not true. I'm January to December, or I'm a school and I operate July to June. You can't change it here. You've got to go back to your business maintenance page, return to facility, go to the very bottom of your business maintenance page, and that's where you'll change it. It's pretty hard. Anytime you're reporting fiscal year information, it's going to be in arrears. So that's why we need to make sure you couldn't really report October to September yet because it's not done yet. So if you operate October to September, you're going to be reporting last October to September. We want the last complete fiscal year. That's what will go here. You should be able to go to your claims and pull this information yourself if you don't have it readily available to know how much you've been paid. But just know we will have to ensure that this is the right amount that you were paid for those 12-month period that's your fiscal year. Your total of other federal funds. So this is going to include all kinds of title funding that schools received, Title 20, which is your DHS subsidy, Title 19, which is your adult daycare Medicaid funding. We've had some controversy over that. If we have any adult daycares in here, if you receive any type of Medicaid, it is considered, a portion of it is federal funds. It is state funds and it's matched with federal funds. So we do need to know that dollar amount. So the question, do we report funds received? You report or the funds relating to those months. I'm not sure I understand your question. You would report, when you report to your accountant, or for an example, to do your taxes, you would report that same fiscal year information to us. Does that make sense? So it's sort of one and the same. In CACFP, as far as we're concerned, any expense that's related to CACFP, regardless of when you pay it, it needs to be allocated to the month it occurred in. Yes, tribal funds are also federal funding. We've increased this box here last year because the amounts are getting larger and larger, and we should be able to accommodate a really large number. But if you get one and it gives you weird characters, let us know. No, if your fiscal year is January through December, you're going to report January through December. You would never guesstimate any funds that you spend or receive. So if you're January through December, this form here, you're going to report January through December of 2020, because we haven't finished 21 yet. Does that make sense? Okay. And the reason it's important and that we make sure we're reporting the correct fiscal year here is there is regulation, and this is a federal regulation for all federally funded programs. If you make $750,000 or more in federal funds in a year, you have to have an audit. And when we talk about an audit, we're not talking about our administrative reviews. When we talk about an audit, we're talking about an outside entity comes in and audits your organization. And this is required if you make more than this amount. Regardless of if you're a multi-sided or if you're an individual who has a company that owns 4 or 5 different sites, you need to report all that information because that's your total funds received, both federally and CACFP. Because we have to know if you as an entity, as a business, as an organization has made more than $750,000 in a year. If you have to have an outside organization audit, independent audit or something like that. Now, we sort of sprung this on some of, we were missing the boat on some of our independent daycares, especially those that had more than one center. And we kind of sprung it on you guys last year and sent some of you into a panic. because that financial audit can be costly. And we do have that ability to incur that cost at the state level. So for those of you that don't get this audit, if you're one of those ones that we contacted last year and was like, hey, you made over this amount, you've got to get this audit, don't fret. We're working with an outside accounting agency, and they're going to be conducting that. On the years that you aren't up for a review from our office, you'll get a financial audit from a separate entity that we're contracting with, because this is regulatory. So we're willing to help out with you that are smaller entities. You might make over this amount and you wouldn't normally get one, but you're having to because of this requirement now. But most of you in here, schools, larger nonprofit organizations, you guys have to get that anyways. And you're probably familiar with Becky Gray. She's the one that's responsible for collecting those now from our office. And so within 9 months after the end of your fiscal year, if you've made over that $750,000 threshold, if you've not already turned in an audit to us, you'll get a nice letter from Becky that says, hey, we need this from you or else, kind of thing. So if you have an audit, you've probably experienced getting that letter, and then you just send it and all is fine. With all that said, if you don't go over that $750,000 a year threshold, then you do not have to have an outside audit. And this date of last audit is not referring to the administrative review we conduct. It's referring to that other audit that you're required to have. So if these two numbers don't add up to be more than $750,000, you do not need to put a date here. However, if it does, you do have to put a date. And if you don't have a date to put, don't make something up. You're going to have to contact us, and we're going to have to work with you to get that taken care of. So I have another question. On your application, so we'll talk about the budget in a minute, but on this page, you're going to put what you made, which for your last fiscal year, which you should know because it should be over. Whether it's October to September, July to June, January to December, your last completed fiscal year should be well over, and you should be able to report what you made in those funds. In the budget, we're going to look at, that's a projection of the upcoming year. And it's going to still be based on your financial fiscal year, not our fiscal year. The $750,000 is federal funds. Everything you're reporting on this page should only be federal funds. So that's subsidy and CACFP, schools is title, I don't know, all these different titles, Title 5, Title 1, only federal funds. Yes, if your fiscal year is January to December, all you're reporting on this page is anything that you made for federal funds, January to December. You know, my understanding is if you did receive a PPP loan, that is federal funding, and it has to be included here, but it's grant money too. So I think we need to get some clarification on that. I'm gonna write a note right now because that was asked the other day. Okay. I don't want to say for sure on that, the PPP loans, but we'll find out. Okay. So if this form doesn't say for you, that means something's missing. If we did not have to pay income tax on, okay. But you also don't pay taxes on CACFP funds either. It's a reimbursement. So I can't tell you for sure whether or not it would have to be reported as federal funds. Let me reach out and we'll find out for sure. I will tell you though that If these two numbers don't add up to be 750,000 and you put a date here, it's going to submit the form anyways and delete it, because we don't need to know about any kind of date for anything if you don't make over that threshold. So again, you're reporting your prior fiscal year. If you operate January to December, that would be of 20. That's all last year. I mean, that would be 20 for everyone, depending on whatever months you operate. Once you get it done, you click submit form, and that's it. Return to checklist. I'll reach out to USDA today and ask them that about the PPP loan. So, mill policy statement. You are still not able to access the new application. If you can't do it, you might just have to sit through and watch this, and then when we get done here, one of us can contact you and get you help. Okay. This one's pretty easy. You just have to agree with it. You agree and move on. And that one's easy. Civil rights. We have made no changes to this form. Last year we changed a little bit. You'll read this. It's the statement, our big long civil rights non-discrimination statement. Click next page after you read through that. And there's a series of questions that you have to answer, and be as informative as you can on all of these, telling us how your institution is contacting minorities and grassroots organizations. How are you letting others, what are other steps will be taken by the institution to ensure minorities have equal opportunity to participate? Most of you probably would just be doing your public release or maybe DHS. Some of you might actually be doing outreach. Everyone has to say you have not had any non-compliance. Number 5 was when we changed last year. Year before, we made it really complicated on civil rights. We got to make sure everybody's doing their civil rights training. We sent that out last week. I actually sent it out twice because once I forgot the instructions and then I sent it again with the instructions attached. So make sure that you're taking that civil rights self-paced course. It's pretty short, doesn't take much time at all. Everyone in your institution should have this civil rights training. You're simply going to check that you've had it, but please don't check it if you haven't had it, because if you check it and say you did it and then you forgot to do it, then we're going to come out for a review. You forgot to do it. You don't have the certificate. Now you're going to have a finding. So stop right here if you haven't done it, and go. If you didn't get that email, you should have, or you can go in our resource library in our training, and it'll give you instructions how to find that in OK Connect, I think is what it's called now. OSDE Connect, I can't remember. If you are a school and you've taken the school civil rights training, we will honor that one in CCFP. You don't have to redo it. And then 6 participants. Sheila, can you elaborate? No, it's just for your CACFP person. Well, it's for your adult personnel. All your providers have to take it. All your people, all the people operating the program have to be in compliance with civil rights. Okay, so 6 and 7 is just, we've added that a couple years ago. We need to capture that if there's any languages that are spoken other than English, we really need to know. And if there's any materials that we need to provide, if you have that need, it's to capture. We have stuff in Spanish if as needed, but there might be other languages that we're missing that we need to get materials on. So please let us know. And then when you're done, you submit and return to checklist. Those of you that are multi-sided, you'll notice your checklist is a little different. You have the sponsoring organization form that's, I think, the second one. We'll come back to it at the end after we get through going over all the forms that apply to everyone. So public release, nothing has changed about this. If you are a brand new institution, you have to do a public release. You have to actually send this out to wherever. You don't have to pay for it. There's no guarantee that they'll actually, release it, that they'll publish it. but you have to send it. And what we need is for proof of that, and the easiest thing to do is you'll click this public release statement. It says exactly what you need to release to the public. Put your information in on it, attach it in an email, and send it to whatever newspaper or publication that you want to have it published in. Once you've sent that email and asked them to publish it, send us that email as proof that you submitted it. Like I said, there's no guarantee that it'll get published, but you've done your due diligence to send it and ask for it to be published. In every year that you're renewing, you do have the option, the little button here appears above or below here. If you want to opt into the statewide release, every year after applications are done, we print up a big long list of all of our approved applications and institutions, and we send it down to our communications department. They do the public release for us. So you only have to do it the first year, but if you choose to continue to do it, that's fine too. So upload that information here, or just click your statewide release when it appears and submit it. And then return the checklist. The state agency institution agreement. So we haven't really changed much policy. It feels like we've got some new procedures we're implementing this year, but our policies haven't really changed. But this is where you're going to find all of our policies that back up anything really that we do. It tells us what your responsibilities are, and it tells you what our responsibilities to you are. We did update in this is several pages. We did update where the meal patterns are, because as you know, we're transitioning this year from doing grains in servings to ounce equivalents, so we updated that. We also did take any reference to a 15-minute leeway on meal times. That's been taken away. So if you were accustomed to having any type of leeway before a meal time, we don't allow that anymore. Mostly because it's just getting too confusing. On your application, when we get to it here in a little bit, you're gonna tell us what time you start and what time you end. That's all we need to know. If you need to build in your own kind of leeway so you have enough time to get those stragglers that come in late or the ones that come in early a little bit, that's fine. But we just need your potential beginning date and your end date for each meal time. Did I say you only have? Yes, that is correct. You only have to do the one individually. You can just opt into ours every year after that. So it's really the only thing we've changed on this form, but I would highly suggest each of you to print this out every year because it is a living document, and it does, if you unfortunately have a finding in a review or you have a question about anything, you're going to find it here. So it does change from year to year because we do have every once in a while make new policies or things like that. So I would encourage you to print it. Like I said, you see it's several pages long. But you do have to submit that you understand and accept the terms of agreement. But this formally has to be done once. It's a permanent agreement. So if you're renewing, you inserted your application, you were approved last year, this is going to roll forward every year, submitted and approved, because it's a permanent agreement. But that's why I encourage you to print it every year, because updates are made typically every year to it. So you really don't have to do anything on this form. I just ramble on to tell you it's important to print it. Okay, owners, board member page. This is a pretty straightforward form, but I feel like we have a lot of, we get some confusion on it. So we got to make sure we're reporting the right thing. If you're just an owner, if you just own a daycare or some for-profit institution, we just need to know your owners. You might have more than one. List the owner and the co-owners, okay? But if you don't have a board, don't put anything down here. But if you're a for-profit, or a private nonprofit, or if you're an incorporated entity, like say you own several centers and you are an incorporated business, you have to have a board. If you're incorporated, you know that. We have to have you list that board here. So just make sure that you're listing all those board members and all the information that's required, and make sure the birth dates are right. We'll get these in here and you've just listed, somebody's listed the same birth date for everyone. We can't approve that. It has to be accurate information. This is regulatory that we have this information for all your board members. Some of these board members are not okay with sharing that, and I'm sorry, but it's regulatory, so we can't approve it. There's just really nothing we can do other than say, you can't be approved if you can't report that information. It's regulatory. The main reason is, unfortunately, if you were ever found seriously deficient, there's the potential that those people listed on your board could also be held responsible and be placed on the National Disqualified List, or the NDL. And so we have to collect that information up front. So make sure you're listing the correct information. Something we did add new this year was down here. We need to know what was the date of your last board member. I mean, the last board meeting, sorry. I couldn't get it to unclick and I got sidetracked. What was the last date or the last board meeting? Okay, so brand new applicants have to tell us, give us a copy of their last 3. But once you're approved and renewed, we need to see the last one. So we want the date, and then you're going to have to submit a copy of the minutes from that board meeting that you've listed. And who do you send that to? You send it to the person who's listed on the bottom of your business maintenance page as the one assigned to your application. Yes. If you have a board, it has to be listed. And if your board members change throughout the year, that needs to be updated. Once you've done that, you submit and return to checklist. I'm not even gonna, yes, you're supposed to list all board members. Disclosure of lobbying activities. I'm not even gonna really open this one. You just gotta open it, scroll to the bottom and submit. If you don't do any type of lobbying activities, which currently I don't know anyone, sometimes we have a bigger, every once in a while we'll have someone that does it. If you guys don't even know what this is, don't worry about it. Just scroll to the bottom, put in your name, submit it. Because I don't think anybody really does it. You could prove me wrong though. Somebody could fill this out, but if you're doing lobbying, you need to report it. I don't think it's happening. Okay, our application for participation. The type of application that I'm on right now is just a single-sided daycare, pretend independent application. So if you're multi-sided, or if you're a family daycare home sponsor, you're going to have multiple applications here. Family daycare homes, you kind of tune this out right now because this form is not applicable for you guys. We'll look at the provider form here in a little bit. But this, a lot of it operates the same. It just looks a little bit different. Well, Roseanne, we just have to, I don't know when that would have changed. I just know regulations state that you have to list all board members. And so that will be looked at closer during reviews. I don't know. I know that, why is it not showing check marks for starting in each of the areas? I'm not sure, unless you're not saving any information. Generally, when you go into the forms and you go in there and you save anything, it'll mark it as started. I know it's a pain to have to list because some of you might have really large boards. I get it. I know it's a pain, but we just have to make sure we're collecting all that information because we're looking at it more on the back end too when we're coming out for a review. So don't, just make sure you're not missing anything so we don't catch it there. Okay. And like I said, the provider application for your family daycare homes, we'll come back to that in a little bit. So this will look a little bit different, but it's generally the same information. This is all auto-populated. So if it's wrong somewhere else on our system, like on the business maintenance page, or if you're multi-sided, it's wrong in the site maintenance. And as you all know, and I'll go on that when we switch over to multi-sided, we block down site maintenance for everyone. So if you need site information change for your people, you got to contact us. But we'll look at that here in a minute. B, you've got to put the name of that site representative or director. whoever that main person is at the site. For you single-sided ones, that's pretty simple. But those of you that have multiple sites, we need to know when we come out to that site, who are we looking for that's responsible? Is the site affiliated with the sponsor? For our single-sided institutions, this is grayed out because you're not affiliated with the sponsor because you're single-sided. We do require a site agreement though for sites that are under a multi-sided sponsor. If you aren't affiliated, if you are an unaffiliated site, you have to have site agreements for all those. And I have a list of those institutions this applies to, and hopefully by the end of the day, I'll be reaching out to you. We don't have a lot of sponsors that have unaffiliated sites, but those of you that do, you will be required to do the site agreement. And all it is just an agreement between the site, whoever the site is, the responsible person at the site, and the sponsor, just so that you're agreeing and you have a mutual agreement that that space can be used for the operation of the CCFP. So examples of affiliated sponsors would be if you're a school at risk, all your sites are affiliated. If you're a Head Start, you're already affiliated through the Head Start grantee, things like that. But we do, most of us are at risk that have unaffiliated sites. So we'll be reaching out to those that will need that. Is your center licensed or approved by a federal, state, or local authority? This is really just asking, like, are you a licensed daycare facility? If you are, put yes. If not, put no. And when you put no, it's going to default your license capacity to 0, because if you're not licensed, you shouldn't have a license capacity. And we changed that maybe last year. I think it was last year. And if you aren't licensed, we have to have that DHS exemption that supports that you're not required to have one. So there are lots of reasons you can be exempt from the licensing law, but it is required that you're licensed by DHS in the state of Oklahoma if you're providing childcare more than 15 hours in a week. So our at-risk institutions, things like that, they don't have to have it. We just have to have something in DHS, and we have the instructions on the resource library on how to reach out to DHS. It's pretty simple. You need to find your local DHS person and just say, hey, I have this program. This is where we're at. This is our hours of operation. And do we qualify for this exemption? And they'll just basically say yes or no. And that's all we need. Right. I think everybody that's on our programs that aren't licensed and have to get this exemption, they're approved under the one, because there's a big list of reasons you could be exempt, but everyone operates under 15 hours in a week. It's going to be your at-risk programs, because they operate a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours every afternoon. Schools are exempt for this though, because you guys are already your accredited public school institutions. We don't need that exemption from DHS. You do not have to do this, but all of our other type of sites that provide childcare do. Do you operate in any other states? Most of you probably are no, but we do have some larger corporations that operate in multiple states, and we need to know if yes, in which states, and then specify what type of institution. Most of you in here are probably going to be none of the above. The type of institution, all this should roll forward from the year prior, but make sure it's accurate. We need to know if you're a tribe or a school, you're public, if you're proprietary by Title 20, or if you're not Title 20, you're approved on your free and reduced price eligibility. H, like I said, these should roll forward. It should be correct. Most of your child care, we do have a lot of Head Starts, adult daycare, outside school hours care center. We have very, very few of those. And this is not just asking, do you provide childcare outside of school hours? This is a specific description of a type of care that is outside school hours only. So a good example of this would be a school that operates 4 days a week, but then on the 5th day, they provide some kind of care or activity on Friday for the children. You wouldn't have to be licensed because it's under that 15 hours a week, but you only do it outside of your normal school hours, or something during spring break or things like that. Generally, if you're a daycare, you're already providing care during those hours. This does not apply to you. We have very few this really applies to. We have a couple more than we have had in the past because of COVID. COVID has changed everything. And then we have our at-risk programs. It's important to make sure this information, if you see that your date of date of determination has expired or will soon, make sure you reach out to Jennifer Pryor. She's working with our at-risk institutions and making sure that that information is always up to date. So just so you know, once you come on and you're approved as an at-risk, you have to be in an area eligible, and that determination only lasts for 5 years. So once that expires, your claim you'll go in there and try to claim, and they'll say, oops, you can't claim. With the exception right now, we do have an area eligibility waiver that if you are an at-risk and you're interested in operating in an area that wouldn't normally be 50% or above, holler at me directly and I'll help you. Proprietary Title 20 is those, I'll skip down here real quick. So for a for-profit entity to be eligible to participate in this program, you have to have at least 25% of your enrolled children to either be on Title 20, DHS subsidy, or 25% of them have to qualify as free and reduced. And so if you, for an example, we have this happen sometimes. You may come on as Title 20. When we come out to your approval visit, you're like, yep, you got at least 25% kids on Title 20. But then you might decide to go off the DHS subsidy. If that happens, we would need to change you to proprietary, free, and reduced. Then we would need to look at all your applications and make sure that you had at least 25% of those children that were free or reduced. This does not apply to nonprofit institutions. Nonprofit institutions can operate based off they're eligible because they have a 501c3, and they just claim the meals at whatever rates each of the kids categories fall in. When completing the items in the checklist, can you leave a form and return? Some of the forms have a save button, and we are honestly working on that because it's irritating for us too. You can, if it has a save button, you can save it, but generally most of them you have to submit it, and if something's missing, it won't save. But we're working on having save buttons submitted to all of our forms. Okay, age of enrolled participants. That's simple. License capacity, like I said before, if you have a capacity, you want to put what it actually is. Hours of operation. Everything's a military time if you're not already familiar. Dates of operation, this is important that you update this, especially if you're brand new, okay? So if you're brand new and you didn't get approved till June, this is going to roll over and say June of 2021. Make sure you change it to 10/1 of 2021 because you're eligible for the whole year. And you're eligible all the way to the last day of September next year. This gets kind of confusing for schools because schools operate from July to June. And so sometimes we'll get schools that'll come in here and put the last day of school. Don't do that. Put the whole fiscal year. Because even though your school year ends in May, you're still going to come back in August and September and operate. If you're multi-sited, well, there'll be two areas we can put our license capacity, hours of operation. If you're multi-sited, you have an application for participation for every one of your sites. So if you have, center number 1, you're going to put whatever is applicable to center number 1, so on and so forth. Number of operating days per week and weeks per year. Schools, generally, you know exactly how many days and weeks you have. If you don't know, just put 5 and 52. You serve meals to participants in shifts. So everyone's allowed to apply to serve for meals and shifts, but you need to truly be operating in shifts. And generally shift meals are for when you have transition of kids coming and going. So breakfast time is when we see a lot of PM snacks. You have kids that come in, eat breakfast, go to school, then you have another set of kids that you feed. Whatever the need is, we need to know why. It's not just so that it allows your application to let you claim beyond your license capacity. You are allowed, it is regulatory, that you can claim up to your maximum, you're allowed to claim up to your maximum license capacity for 2 different shifts. So I just stress that it's important that it's not to allow you to claim outside of your license amount. Does that make sense? You got to serve 2 separate shifts, 2 separate times. Check all the months that apply. This looks different for you because I'm logged in as me. Yours just says these are all grayed out. So when it rolls over, we'll check the months that you're approved for. If you don't submit your application until November 1st, your October won't be checked. This directly ties to your claims. For schools that are on at-risk and any other at-risk, we won't check June and July because you're not allowed to submit claims when school year is not in session. Section 3, number 1, will records be on site on a daily basis? You have to say yes, they have to be there. And number 2, we want to know how are you taking an actual physical count as meals are served? How are you counting meals? If you say something to the effect of, as they're coming through the line, you're taking count, or as you take the meals to the classroom and you watch the teacher serve them, I don't know, something to that effect. But if you say they're based on attendance, that's not an acceptable response. It has to be something where you're actually physically seeing the child take a reimbursable meal. How are you taking those counts of those meals served? This section here is where you will have your meal times. And as I mentioned before, it's important for us to know when do you begin and when do you end. And that these are always as up to date as possible because that's when our consultants are going to come out and conduct a meal observation. So if these times aren't right and we show up, we've already served or what have you, that can cause issues. There are several edits in this that will not allow you to save it until it's all aligned. So that's why I entered some meal times up here. So I'm going to enter a breakfast. If I tried to enter a breakfast before 8:30, it wouldn't let me because it would say it doesn't agree with your hours of operation. So we're going to say we're going to have breakfast from 9 to 10, and your maximum number of meals cannot exceed your license capacity unless you don't have a license capacity, and then this is obsolete. Then that would be for your at-risk, your unlicensed facilities, and then you're just going to use, maybe base it off your current enrolled number, things like that. It won't let you claim over the amount that you put here. This is all tied to your claim. Okay, so then it added my meal time. You might have seen the message that popped up and I clicked through it real quick. You all are going to experience this. Any changes that you're making to meal times now and in the future, you're going to see that message. The message is that mealtime changes have to be submitted to SDE on a form to support why you're changing mealtime. So for the FY22 application, you can just click through those messages if you need to change anything. If you don't have any meal times that need to change, then don't worry about it. Meal times are serving times, correct? So we had an audit finding where we had meals that had been paid for, but now there weren't serving times. And how that happened was, say you did a supper, right? And you were claiming suppers, but then halfway through the year, you're like, we don't want to do supper anymore. So you came to this form and you clicked delete, and it just deleted it. It went away. Now our system has record of paying you all these suppers, and now the time is gone. That's a problem. And it's just the system failed us, and there was no way to, once it was deleted, it was gone. It's not in the history. So the only way we can solve it is to make you guys have to submit a form to tell us what the time was and what you're changing it to. This only applies to these applications that are in an approved status. So if you are a renewing institution and you're like, oh, now that she says that, I need to go change the meal time for August. If you go do that on your August already approved FY21 application, it's going to kick it out. It's going to kick this form out and it's going to be unapproved. And it's going to stay in that status until you guys go to we've sent it out, but then I also upload it in the resource library. It's the meal time change form. You have to fill that out and send it to your assigned person. and then we'll approve that time, because we're gonna have to maintain that record to show what the time was and what it is now, okay? Whether you're updating or deleting a meal time, we have to keep a paper record of that for the auditor's sake. But for your new application for FY22, you saw that I got that information, or I got that same, like I just tried to delete it. You're gonna get that message because it's just in the code, but just move on, because we still have to come back and approve this application. It's not in an approved status. So just click through the message for your renewal application, and then we'll come and approve it. But for FY22, after you're approved and you're operating after October, if you need a mealtime change, after you've been approved, you'll have to have that form submitted before we'll approve it. That form is kind of confusing. Somebody asked who signs it at the bottom. Just whoever the responsible person is, whether if you're a center, if it's the director, or if you're multi-sided, it's just whoever would normally sign off on anything. The person that's probably completing this application would be a good person. And then when it comes in here, we'll sign off on it and get it approved. For family daycare homes, it's the provider and the sponsor that signs off on it. Right. For family daycare homes, the provider signs, like Karen just said, and then the sponsor will sign off on it. It's a really confusing time to implement a form like that right now, because we're in the middle of application renewal, but it really is in response to correct an audit finding that we had, that pretty significant audit finding. Section B is for comments. It used to be for directions, where you had to type your directions to your facility, but that's obsolete because most of us weren't even looking at it anyhow. So we just changed it to a comment section. And this would be a perfect place for any institution that's operating any differently right now because of COVID. If you're a school, you're already really familiar with the waivers and stuff in place because you've already gone through, or you are going through your application renewal on NSLP. We have all those same waivers that allow you to operate differently, except for the meal pattern waiver. CACFP, there are no flexibilities with meal patterns. You have to follow meal patterns. We've provided years of technical assistance and leniency on that. And so you have to be following meal patterns. But we do have the, drawing a blank, mealtime flexibility. We have the non-congregate, we have the parent pickup. If you operated in any type of different capacity because of COVID in the past, and you still see the need for that now, you can, but you need to put those notes here because we have to get the proper documentation from you to be able to support you and approve you to do that. If you're not going to operate any differently than you normally would in a non-COVID world, then that, just forget what I just said, and then that applies. Section C is just more information about your center. Are you a nonprofit? If so, we have to have your 501c3. You guys know that. Does this site participate as a Head Start? D talks about the methods by which meals will be provided. There should only be one of these 5 selected. You really can't, for each site, there can't be more than one. So preparation at a meal service location, you have a kitchen, you cook on site. That's what you select. If you have a central kitchen, like you have more than one site, you cook at one place and you take them there, that would be what this is. All these 3 here, if you're under contract with any type of outside entity, even if it's a school system, you have to have an approved contract in place. The current contract and the most current and the correct contract is on the resource library. We have to make sure we've added some pages to it where you have to have this debarment page that has to be on there. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you look on your contract, it's not there, then you've got the wrong one. So reach out to us, make sure you have the right contract. These contracts have to be renewed every year. And it's important, I want to point out this one, if you are an entity that contracts with a school system to provide meals, this contract is going to have some kind of skewed dates on it, because really you have to be the meal, as you know, with schools, their meal prices change every year, just like ours do. Our meal reimbursement rates are released in July-ish every year. And so if you are under contract with the school system and they're providing your meals, they have to abide by a certain meal price. And like I said, that changes every July. So your contract that you have with the school that's providing you meals, the dates of that contract really should be July to June. And it should be renewed every July because that's when their meal prices change. They have to be charging a certain amount. This last one here is just, we didn't really have a good place to put it. So this one's here. If you're contracting with any outside entity to do any type of consulting for anything with CACFP, if it's helping to create menus, if it's helping you to fill out your application, if it's helping you to do your daily paperwork, we need to know about that because it has to be procured properly and you have to have a contract in place. So I have a question here. If you have a private owned childcare facility and you're required to be open all day, when your local school goes virtual, are you required to file a waiver for every time our after school program goes virtual? Are we compliant since we already include our lunch service? So if you're not changing the way you're operating, then you wouldn't need any special waiver. If you just now have extra kids that are virtual because school's out for whatever reason, and now they're part, at your center and you're feeding them, you would just claim them like normal. But if you're needing to do anything to accommodate them differently, like if they're not staying on site and they're coming there to get a grab and go meal or something like that, that's why you would need a waiver. But if they're just coming on site because their school is closed, then you would just operate as normal. E and F, E, you need to report your number of participants enrolled. And then F is for for-profit sites only. And we talked about that a minute ago. So depending on whether you're Title 20 eligible or free and reduced eligible, you'll put those numbers in here, how many you have of each of those, and it'll do the calculations for you and tells you your percentage to determine whether you're eligible or not. Nonprofits don't have to fill this section out. Section B is another one of those that's pretty seems straightforward, but we get a lot of mistakes on it because it is kind of confusing. Every site has to have a person who's responsible for admin duties. And these are actually two sections. So this section here is where you're going to list people who have program related duties. And down here is where you list the person who has program administrative duties. Every site has to have one of these people. So if you only have one person that's doing everything, they cook, they clean, they serve, they do the paperwork, then just list that person here. But if you have multiple people, like you would need to put them in different places, but we at least have to have one here. So in my pretend center, I have a cook and I cook food. And there's just one of me that does that, okay? I'm going to insert that cook there. We don't want the cook's name. We just want to know the name of the position. You'll see here it's missing the admin flag. So this is where I'm going to put the director. And the director does paperwork and claims. There's only one of those people. Did I click add? Thinking about it. There we go. All right. Now this would be acceptable because now I've got a person listed here that has this flag. If you submit this form and there's no one with this little check mark, we're going to have to kick it back out and make you, didn't spell that right. We would have to make you redo it. The reader. Okay. Section E, we did make some changes to this. So if you have paid attention to, we send out, we try to keep you guys pretty informed, and we did send an email out about how the visual observation of collecting racial and ethnic data has been done away with. USDA feels that that is not an accurate way to collect information. And I give this example, and every time I've talked about this, it's funny, if you were to look at a picture of my kiddo, he would just be a white kid. He would just be a Caucasian white kid, blonde hair, blue eyes. He's actually part Asian. He would never get chalked up to be Asian, and because his appearance doesn't seem that way. And so that is why visual observation is not an accurate way to collect this data. It's really placing the burden back on you guys because you're going to have to find a way to get get that information, but we can't force any parents to report anything if they don't want. So all the references in this about visual observation has been removed. Really, the only way to collect it now would be by self-report. That's really it. Or if you have some other means of getting that data from like DHS, I would just stick to encouraging the parents to self-report. It's important. It's important information that is reported back to USDA and used for different things. But they don't have to. So for our independent institutions, like just our regular daycares, you guys have the income application, and on it is that race and ethnic breakdown. Encourage your families to fill it out. They don't have to, but that's how you're going to have to collect it now. For our other entities that don't use the family size and income application, that would be like our at-risk, our Head Start, and our family daycare homes. You guys use it, but not every child, well, not every family would ever see a family size and income application, just depending on, how they're tiered. So if you're in that situation where you don't use those family size and income applications for all your children, you're going to have to utilize something else to collect that data. And I have created an enrollment form, and it's on the resource library, like for Head Starts. You guys are still required to do an enrollment form to collect that for CACFP information, but you don't have to do the income application. So there is an enrollment form that's been created that's got the ethnic breakdown and your racial breakdown where you can collect that. But like I said, it's there and available. You can encourage it, but it still says optional. We have turned off the edit, which is probably good because this is the one that we get the most confusion on. You come down here, you put in your data, you click submit, and it says it doesn't agree. Because we had an edit in the system that would require this number and this number to equal your number of enrolled. Well, if all your families didn't report a race or ethnicity, there's no way you can report that accurately. Also, if you're familiar with doing this application, you might have had in the past a family that's reported multiple races. You were still forced to only select one for that child because this number still had to add up to equal your enrollment, and each child could only be one race, which still isn't very accurate. Let me back up, we got some questions. If parents don't participate, do we just guess? No, guessing would be visual observation. If they don't respond, you just don't put anything. And like I said, we turned it off. So if you have some that don't respond, you just don't put them in your numbers and you won't get that error about your enrollment not matching. For would it be possible to email parents? You are welcome to create whatever type of method you want to collect that. Yes, whatever makes it easier for you. Like with a lot of things with USDA, they come out with changes and then they say guidance is coming. We're still waiting on our own guidance because we have to collect that too when we're doing our reviews. So we really don't have a good method for ourselves if you guys aren't able to collect it. So if you want to create a way, that's great. But just know it's not going to force these numbers to match anymore. I suspect in the future what's going to happen is we're going to have to add some boxes for not reported. And then we're going to also need to add a box for 2 or more races because it's really not accurate. I don't know the best word. It's just not that accurate anymore that children are just one race. So we need to have a way to collect when we have multiple races. So that's what I feel in the future will come until we get further guidance. But for right now, you're going to encourage your parents to report it, take what they've reported and report whatever it is in these categories, and it's not going to be forced to match your enrollment. Nothing about this bottom section has changed. This is just reporting your potential beneficiaries. And if you need help with that, you can contact us and we can get you those numbers. For now, what do we do for 2 races? For 2 races, you can report them both because those numbers don't have to add up. So if you have someone that reports, Asian and white, you can mark them both in the Asian and white numbers because this isn't going to compare back to your enrollment. And then in the future, like I said, I think we'll have a box for 2 or more or something to that effect. but you should be able to accurately report all the different races that are reported right now. And then the last part is your training. It's just basically another one of our fancy attestation statements where you got to check the box and it says, yes, you'll make sure that this institution or provider or what have you has had training on all these topics. Now, they don't have to come to our training. As you know, we've implemented, you guys have to come to training every year. You don't have to make sure all of your people come to one of our trainings. So the primary responsible person has to come to training. And you are responsible for training if you're multi-sited or even not multi-sited. You're responsible for training all your people in your institution that has any CACFP responsibilities. We have all of our training and everything available in the resource library that you can use. But this training does not count as that training. Where is the best place to find the potentially eligible numbers? And there's a report, the school's report, and I'm looking at my girls that are in here because I'm kind of making stuff up right now. But there's a report on SDE website that has, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So schools have to report that every year. And there is a report on the SDE website. What they've just told me is your best bet is to call your school and they can give you those breakdowns because we were in the school side, we report these same categories of race. Oh yeah, that's right. You can also go to Hometown Locator if you're familiar with that. You can just Google it and you can find the information there. Any questions? Potentially eligible for adult daycare? Gosh, I don't know because everywhere it's really reported. Let me do some research on that, Kim. I have a feeling we could find it from census data. But sometimes census data can be difficult because they have more races than what we report. Hometown, I'm told that's also on Hometown Locator. So if you Google Hometown Locator, that should help you. If not, Kim, holler at me and we will get a better answer for you. It's really just a report, you know, your potential, where is the need in that area? And that's it. Submit and return to checklist. Any questions? Okay. Adult questionnaire. It's pretty straightforward. Be as detailed as you can. We do have a couple of adults and adult daycares in here. Check all that apply. You've got to provide group activities and things like that. Most of these questions, I think you have to be doing. We're basically stating what you have to do and you're telling us how you do it. Same thing for your at-risk. Really? This form should not require you to submit it if you aren't an adult daycare. Yeah, if it does, let me know. Uploaded documents button has been grayed out since last year. We took that away because it just got really overwhelming. We have to make sure we have the right documentation in there. So if you have a document that needs uploaded, you have to send it to the person that's assigned to you and they'll take care of it for you. So anyway, adult questionnaire, answer these questions, be as detailed as you can, submit. It's pretty straightforward. Generally, if we're asking you a question, we're just kind of telling you what you need, and you need to tell us how you're doing it. Same thing for your at-risk. It's just a few short questions, but we need to know, are you organized primarily to provide care for children after school or on weekends or holidays or school vacations? As you know, at-risk can only operate during the school year, so we need to know any times that you're operating. Number 3, 4, and 5, they have to be yes. It has to include organized and regular activities in a structured and supervised environment. You have what? Oh yeah, 5 is no, sorry. 3 and 4 have to be yes. You have to have an education or enrichment activity that is regulatory, even if you're a situation where you're doing grab and go, that was never waived in everything that was done away with last year. And we were just like willy-nilly doing CACFP and all our programs like crazy. You still had to do the enrichment, even if it's a slip of paper that's in the grab and go bag that gives them directions to a website where the enrichment activities are. You still have to have it, and we still have to look for it. Most of you are still operating like normal. You're just going to put, tutoring, underwater basket weaving, whatever it is. Goes in number 4. I don't know if that would, I don't think that would be an allowable activity, but number 5, you can include interscholastic and community level competitive sports, but it can't be the only thing. So if you're just wanting to do at-risk and feed your football team on Friday nights, that's great. But you also have to, it has to be opened up to your entire community. You have to feed anyone that just so happens to include your football team. So just for an example. And you submit and return your checklist. If you're not adult or you're not at risk, neither of these forms apply to you, and you should not have to even open them up and fill it out. Okay, so the administrative budget. For those of you that are multi-sided, this is not going to be news to you, and you don't have this anyway. It's on your sponsor application. We'll come back to that here in a minute. This is the budget for independent institutions, whether you're at risk or daycare. It has changed significantly. How do you opt into the statewide press release? So when you're a renewing institution, okay, when you're a renewing institution, I can find the form. There we go. Let me just, hold on. Forget what you just saw because you guys can't do that anyways. But when you're when you're a renewing institution and you insert your application, that's a renewal. It's the second one. It automatically will do this for you, but I just went and told it to do it. So you see now it says institution wishes to participate in the statewide public release. If you're not seeing that, and this is at least your second time to do the program, let us know, but it should insert that for you. If that's the case, we don't need to know about these. You can delete them. You can leave all this blank. You can click this right here, submit, and that's all you have to do on this form. Okay, so the administrative budget, like I said, those of you that don't have this here can just like take a break for a few minutes and come back, and then we'll go over the multi-sided one. Okay, so what we're asking you to report here is no different than what we required before. It's just more broken down, more specific. It might, after you get familiar with it and understand how to do it, might be a little easier and help you understand what we're looking for and where it needs to be reported. As I stated before, when you're reporting stuff to us, whether it's the prior year or your budgeted year, your projected year, you need to report to us your financial fiscal year, okay? So it is going to be kind of, for many years, I think we've been telling people, or we've been having you report our fiscal year versus yours, which, it really kind of all comes out in the wash, because at the end of the day, it's all going to be kind of normal. You might have some months that are anomalies where you spend a lot more or whatever. And then COVID really messed everything up. You had one month where you were operating fine, the next month everyone was closed. But what your projected budget should be reflective of is your fiscal year budget, okay? So for some of you, we're already well into it, that's fine. But we kind of just need to know, what does it cost you for a 12-month period to operate this program? And also, what does it cost you for a 12-month period to operate your entire institution? And we're really going to have to work with some of you on this, especially if you're military or tribal or even schools, because requiring you to report your entire institution budget might be just short of impossible, especially for our tribes and our military. Sorry, guys, just one second. Sorry, guys, had to answer a question real quick. Okay. So like I said, we will have to work with some of you because we are going to be asking you to report more than you might have been used to in the past. So just bear with us. Can this form be copied to have an accountant help fill out? You can have anyone help you fill this out, but it's important to know that just entering numbers here is not sufficient. Every single number, you can't just go type it in. See, I typed there. You have to open up each schedule and fill it out in here. So for Part A, that is just for your administrative costs. Administrative costs are only those that have something to do with paperwork, claims, applications, things like that. Your administrative costs should not include the person preparing food, serving food, any of those things, buying food, really. That's all going to go down your operational costs. It actually has to do with the operation of the program. This is the cost for all those other administrative duties. All right, so your salaries. You're going to open up the schedule and you're going to see this. There's nothing in there, so you need to add an item. Sorry, it auto-populates. So if you're on this call and you see your name auto-populate, that's kind of weird. I don't know why it does that. So I'm going to put me. I'm going to be the director. What if you have no administrative budget as a choice on the application? Then you're multi-sided and you just need to hang tight, and we'll get to that one here in a little bit. If you don't have that at the very bottom, you're not an independent institution. So just we'll get to you guys here in just a bit, okay? Oops. Why I keep doing that? Okay. So the most confusing part about this is going to be how you're reporting the hours. Okay. In the previous budget that you guys are used to, we had you report the total salary and then the percentage. And generally we capped it out at 20 and 80. 20% would be the total amount you could claim for CACFP hours, and then 80% was your center hours. We're generally doing the same thing here, but we're doing it by the number of hours in a year. So the total hours, total annual hours would be, this is all going to be calculated off 2,080 hours a year. And please, you guys, if at any point I'm not making any sense, speak up, send a message or something. 2,080 hours is 40 hours a week times 52 weeks. Okay, so of those 2,080 hours, in column 2, how many of those hours do I spend doing non-CACFP duties? Okay, and that's what I want to report. Then on column 3, I need to report how many hours of that 2,080 hours do I spend doing CACFP duties. So the maximum number of hours that I could put on column 3 would be 416 hours. The way I came up with that amount is that's 20% of 2,080. So whereas on the old budget, we did it by percentages, now we're doing it by hours. So I spend 416 hours a year, 20% of my time, my full-time job, doing CACFP. Then I would put the remaining hours over in column 2. That would be 1,664. Because when we calculate this, we want it to add up to be 2,080. Even if that person really might not always work 40 hours a week. I get it. Some of us work 50, 60 hours a week, but it's still just calculated on what's considered a full-time employment. So then over here, I'm going to put my total salary. And like I said, I'm just letting it auto-calculate that. You have to report taxes. This was something we weren't really capturing in our last budget. It's federal law that we all pay taxes. So it is not allowed, it's not regulatory, it's not lawful to pay people in cash in this program. You can't pay them with Cash App, you can't pay them with Venmo. You've got to pay them and you got to pay taxes. So we have to make sure we're collecting that. So make sure you're putting this here. And these are very specific amounts, and you might have it very specific, but keep in mind it's a projected amount. And it should be kind of based off of the year prior, and you can always put it at a little increased amount. Once you've entered that, that's all you have to enter on this form. You'll click calculate. The form does the rest for you. If these add up to be 2,080, you have something here, you have something there, it will calculate. And like I told you before, here it tells me that's 20%, 416 hours of 2,080 hours, 20%. Then it takes that 20% and applies it to my full salary, which is your wages and your taxes. And it does a calculation. It says, okay, for me as a director, $11,820.80 is the total amount of my salary that I can pay for using CACFP funds. And then you'll click add. And now I'm added in here. And you'll want to do that for every person who has an administrative duty, even if they don't have CACFP duties, because we need to know what it costs to run your entire institution. And what will allow you to do is you really need to list all your individual people. So say you have another person that helps you do applications and they keep up with your paperwork, or they process your family size income applications. I don't know. Someone else, your assistant director, would go here that does any types of those responsibilities. We'd want all those people with CACFP responsibilities listed separately. Then we also need to know about those people that you pay in your institution that don't have anything to do with CACFP, because it still costs money for you to operate your institution, regardless of whether you use CACFP funds or not. And so what I would suggest would be the easiest solution for you to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add, my assistant director. And we'll just say he does the same amount of hours as me. Like, he makes way more than me. I can't have that. Okay, so now we've got our 2 admin people. I'm going to add him. Now I need to add in this budget all my other people for my center who I pay, but I don't use CACFP funds. It would be acceptable for you to just put, teachers, right? And you can say 12 teachers. And they don't do anything for CACFP. They spend all their time doing other non-CACFP duties. They're teachers, right? Or whatever their role is. You would then want to add up the salaries for all those other people and put it here. They get paid well. You want to add up all their taxes and put it here and calculate, so that it's putting it in your budget that it is an expense for you, but you're not using our funds to pay for it, right? And you'll see here that it calculates to be $0 for CACFP, but when we add it, it's still going to put it in as an expense. It still costs you money. It's just not using CACFP money. So you see here you have a big, great number, but over here is just mine and Edgar's allowable amount, because we're the only people who have CACFP duties that we can use CACFP funds to pay for our salaries. Assuming at the end of the month, you have that much money left over to pay for it. And that's the caveat, and that's the thing that's hard to understand about your admin expenses. You're not going to get these amounts in addition to what you're being reimbursed. You are reimbursed your Mealtimes rate, no matter what. There's never anything in addition. Well, there's your cash and move, but you get paid that reimbursement. How you choose to spend it is up to you. You want to buy your food and your milk and your food-related items first, but then whatever you have left over, you can spend on these allowable costs. But if it's not your budget, you can't. So it's important for you guys to make sure you're going through here and thinking of every type of cost that could be used towards CACFP that you might be using, and it would be allowable for you to use CACFP funds to pay for. Doesn't mean that you'll ever really get to pay for it with these funds because you might just spend all your money on food and milk. But in the event that you have money left over, you guys know that you have to spend it. You cannot make a profit off this program. So at the end of the month, when you have money left over, you have all these things in your approved budget to use it for. So that was my spiel on salaries and taxes. I'm trying to open, there it goes. Any questions on how we enter salaries on the admin section? Okay. Benefits. Not everybody, you might not have benefits available, or you may, but if you do, you want to put them in here. And if you do have benefits, you do provide benefits like these to your employees, a portion of it would be an allowable cost. And it's really all based off the amount that's allowable calculated on their salary. So I give Edgar some health care, right? And it costs me this much a year on it. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. Health care is not that cheap. You see that I selected Edgar here, and it automatically populated 20%. That 20% came from a salary. That's his allowable amount on this as well. So you're just going to put in the total cost. I'll just give him health and dental. Probably not very good coverage for $1,200 a year. Calculate and add. So now it's added his allowable amount for CACFP. And you would do the same for your other employees, your 12 teachers, you know. But you see here, it carried over that 0%. And we've got them in the budget, but you know, there's no funds from CACFP that's going to pay for it. Same thing here. We have this larger number here. That's what it costs you as your institution, but this is the amount allowable to pay with CACFP funds. Equipment purchase. I'm not necessarily going to open up every one of these schedules, and every one of them is not going to be applicable to everyone. But your equipment purchase is going to be for anything above $2,500. So many times you're probably not going to plan to spend that much on something. This would be a very good example of your freezer. You have a deep freezer that went out, and you go and buy another one, and you buy a really good big giant deep freezer, you know, and it costs more than $2,500. If it's not in your budget, like we get, like sometimes those type of equipment purchases typically are going to happen in an emergency. Go out, buy it. It's an allowable cost, but make sure you come back here and you get it entered in, right? You've got to get it in your budget, even if you use our funds or not. And you can be able to determine that amount allocated to CACFP. If your refrigerator and freezer is only used to house the food that's only for CACFP, that's an allowable cost at 100%. Like I said, it's not like we're going to give you the extra money because you had to run out and buy a freezer. It's just you can use our funds to pay for it if you have it left over. You've got two separate schedules here for materials, one for durable and one for expendable. Durable are those things that are going to expected to last longer, basically. It's not just use and you're done with it. Durable, it's going to be like, it gives you examples here, desks, chairs, computers, anything that's less than $2,500. Those are allowable costs. If you need a desk or something, you can use a portion of our funds to pay for it, just a portion, because if it's a desk you use to store your paperwork and do your claims and things like that, this is where it would go. Things like pots and pans and kitchen supplies wouldn't go here because that's not administrative. That's going to go down in your operational. Then you have your expendable. Those are things like office supplies, paper clips, pens, pencils, things like that. You do not have to break it down. You can really just say like one item. You really can't, it's hard to judge how much you're going to spend on it, but put it in there. You can look at your budget last year and see how much you spent on office supplies, right? And you can put a reasonable amount. And if you're not sure what a reasonable amount would be, let me show you real quick one good way to do it. I'm going to skip down here and go to office space, rental, and lease, right? First things first, if you don't have any expense for the space that you're using for this program, you cannot use money to reimburse yourself for. You can't pay yourself rent on a building you own, okay? If you own the building or it's not a space that's being paid for, you would have nothing here. But if you're paying rent or leasing a place, you can use a portion, you can pay for it with a portion of it with CACFP funds. Many of you are going to be leasing from an unrelated party, so I'm just going to use this one. You'll click it here and say add, and then you actually have to fill out this space rental agreement, which should be fairly simple if you really are leasing a place. So ABC Realty, put in the address of the realty company. And then put the dates of the lease agreement. So maybe it's 01, I don't know. And it can be for longer than a year. Sometimes lease agreements are for 2, 3 years, I don't know. Put in whatever your lease agreement says. Indicate whether you have any of these included services. And then you're going to determine your square footage. We need to know the total square footage of your facility, and then how much of it is dedicated using to operate the CACFP, right? So it would be all of your kitchen. If you have a cafeteria, it could be your cafeteria. If you serve in your classrooms, it could be a reasonable portion that the area that you serve in your classroom. Any of your common areas, it can be a portion of that. So just come up with a reasonable amount, but you really have to know the square footage. Anything that's really like, if this makes a pretty high percentage, we could question it and make sure it's accurate and that you really measured it off. But generally, you guys should know what your square footage is. So first, you need to determine your total square footage, and we'll say it's 3,000 square feet. And of that 3,000 square feet, you've determined that 900 square feet is what you use for CACFP. That's my kitchen and a portion of all my classrooms because we serve in my classroom. And then I'm going to put in the total amount that it costs me every year. So my rent is $1,000 a month. That's really cheap. So we're going to put 12,000. We're going to calculate. This comes out to be 30%, right? So 30% of my lease amount every year, which comes out to be $3,600, would be an allowable amount that you can use our funds to pay for. The reason I jumped down here and did that would be, this would be a reasonable percentage to apply to everything else. If you just were uncertain, you have a methodology to use. You've done it here. Sometimes you might know exactly how much. You might, if you have office supplies or something that you use 100% for CACFP, then by golly, put it at 100% CACFP. Say that you guys have to print a lot of stuff for us sometimes. You're printing menus, and that's all you print is menus, and you need to buy ink, not mine, printer ink. And say you're going to buy it once a month, and it costs about $100. If all you use that printer for is to print CACFP menus, then that would be 100% allocated to CACFP. It's really up to you guys to know how and what you're using and what you need allocated to CACFP. But like I said, it still goes back to if it's only if you have money at the end of the day to pay for these things, can you do that? Printing and postage. If you go have things printed professionally, you can put that here. Most of you are probably printing your materials yourself. Postage, that would only be if you have I don't know what, if you're mailing stuff to us or if you're mailing out packets that include CACFP stuff. Most of you aren't going to have postage that would be allowable. I could see family daycare homes maybe having more, or sponsors having more postage that's only CACFP related. If you're mailing something to your sites or your family daycare homes, and it's solely about the food program, then that is an allowable cost. We already talked about that. Utilities, this would be another good one. To use that same methodology, that 30%. If you're like, I don't know how much of our utilities we can count, then just defer back to that 30% that we determined with your square footage. That would be very reasonable. Unless you're like a school or somewhere, you might have a separate meter or something. That would be the only way. So we'll say it costs us this much, and we're going to just say 30% because we're really unsure, but we're going to go with the amount that's allowable for our square footage. As long as you have a methodology for determining that percentage and it makes sense and it's reasonable, we'll approve it. Insurance premiums, this would be like, I just drew a blank. You could put vehicle insurance here because you do use your vehicles to go buy groceries maybe, unless you have it all delivered. A portion of that could be put here. I don't know. You might have all kinds of different business liability insurance. You could put a portion of it here. Contracted professional services, this would be if you have an accountant. This is where you would want to put your accountant. Or if you have an outside entity that's helping you with any administrative duty like menus, applications, and you're paying them, they would need to go here. Keep in mind they have to be procured properly, but they would need to go here. Equipment rental lease. Most of you might not have anything like this, but some of those that fall in that category for our sponsors would be like printers, postage machines, things like that. And generally, if you put something here, we're going to ask you for that agreement just to back up what you have here. Most of you, this probably wouldn't apply to. Communications is going to be your telephone, internet. You have to have internet to participate. It's an allowable cost. You can't get on and apply and do your claims if you don't have it. So same thing here. If you're unsure of the percentage, go with your square footage amount. But if all you use the internet for is CCFP, which I doubt, it could be a higher percentage. I could see it being 50-50 because DHS, you have to have internet, if I'm not mistaken, to do your swipey thing. Anyway, it's just got to be reasonable. Advertise public information. So if you choose to do a public release and you pay for it, that would be an allowable cost. You're not required, but it would be an allowable cost. But if you're just advertising your childcare and there's no mention of CCFP, it would not be an allowable cost. But if you were to advertise and mention like, we're on a federally funded food program and provide, meals that meet meal patterns, you could use a portion of the, funds to pay for something like that. Dues, memberships, and subscriptions. The only example I can think of that would be 100% allowable on this would be if you are a member of CCFP association or something that's specifically tied to child nutrition. That would be an allowable cost. But you might have other types of memberships that you could use portions of our money to pay for it, as long as it's reasonable. If you're part of a licensing association, things like that. And then your mileage would go here. Mileage would be for, this primarily is another one that's mostly utilized for our sponsors, but I still threw it in here because if you're driving to go buy your groceries and driving to deliver them back, that's an allowable expense. But you really need to make sure you're keeping logs and travel logs to support that mileage. So that's all your administrative costs. Part B shouldn't be as confusing. It's pretty similar to how it was in the past. It's got your same ones broken up here, but the only difference is you're going to have to enter your food service labor people the same way you did up here. So your food service labor people are those actually cooking and serving meals. Your food related costs and your food milk and your food related costs, you just type in those full amounts. But then on these, you have to actually open up the schedule. And I've already gone through this, but I want to show you real quick. This one's a little different because generally, like if you put your cook here, that's all they do is cook. But if your cook is also a van driver or something like that, you got to break down their hours, and you're probably already familiar. But I want to point out that we do have situations where you might have teachers serving meals. Oops. Right, and she serves, and it still goes off of 2080. So she spends, I don't know, 2 hours a day. I got to get my calculator. 2 hours a day serving meals times 5. 10 hours a week. times 52, that's 520. We'll say service. She helps serve meals, and then the rest of her time she spends doing other things that is not CACFP or whatever. Still got to add up to be 1560. We'll put her salary. We'll let you make more than that. Calculate. Works just the same. There's just one column now. But there is those instances where you might have tribes or a school or somewhere where it is a cost of the program. It does cost money to pay Lisa, and she does do CACFP duties, but we don't use CACFP funds to pay these people's salaries. If that's the case, then you need to click this box. You're telling us what it costs, what it costs Lisa, you to pay Lisa, and you're telling us the number of hours she does for CACFP, but you don't use our money to pay her. You would want to click that. And what that does is it leaves all of this the same. But when we add Lisa to the schedule over here, it doesn't add her in the CACFP budget, right? You can open it up and see that she does cost us something, but it's not being allocated to CACFP. You can see here, I took the check mark out, and now her salary is there. And then the food service benefits are the same. It operates just the same as the schedule before. Part C is your revenue and your income. This is where you're going to list all of your income. You don't want to shortchange yourself. You need to put as much income that you have, that you project making for the year, because you cannot save this form if you're at a loss. It has to be a profit. And it is kind of a catch-22, because we say, well, you can't make a profit, but you can't make a profit off of this program. You can't make a profit off of CACFP funds. All these funds you're listing here aren't all CACFP funds. These are all your funds. So we're looking for two things. One, that you're financially viable, and we talked about that earlier. You have to have other funds coming in to support what it costs you to operate, which is why we need to know these other amounts. So how much does it cost your business to operate? And then what all funds do you have coming in to support that? We ask to look when we come out and do your review to make sure you're not making a profit off this program. But many times than not, your reimbursement may not even cover what it costs for you to operate it. We need to know what other funding you have to cover it. And so then you enter in your projected income and you click calculate profit loss. So we'll just say, still not going to do that. Other federal funding. Okay, so here's all my amounts, A17 and B5, which is this and this added all together. And then it takes my total revenue and it compares it and tells me, am I in a profit or loss? It'll let me save now because I'm in a profit status. If it was in a negative, it would be like, oh, try again. And that is the new budget. Any questions on that? Okay, very quickly, as nothing about this has changed down here. You have to have all the required documentation. We are changing over to a different vendor, how you're paid. So be prepared that if you haven't completed that vendor form that's required, that we've been sending emails out about, that you will not be approved until that's been completed. You will not be approved if you've not attended training. Does somebody have a question? If you've not attended training, this training does not count as that training, that required training. Make sure you go over to your training calendar and register for your manual training. That is the training that you will have to have before your application will be approved. One thing that we did add down here is the date of original application submission. So before you submit your application, it's going to force you to put in the day's date. It'll only allow the current date to go in. This is to help us track, and like as you know, if you've renewed before, or you've experienced where you've submitted your application, then we kicked it out because you had to fix something and then you had to resubmit. This is going to retain that original submission so that we can honor that it was originally submitted in October, so that you won't be penalized. And because you might submit the very last day of October and you're eligible for October, but we have 30 days to approve it. So you won't be penalized for it not being approved. We can still honor that October submission. Okay, so quickly, I'm going to do something that you guys can't do. Lisa, do you have something? Yeah, that's why somebody had their hand raised. And if you have a question, you're welcome to put it in the chat or unmute and speak up. I'm going to do something that you guys wouldn't know. I'm going to change it to a sponsor real quick so we can look at how it looks for sponsors. Yeah, I think maybe we have a question, but you're muted. I know, but I don't know. Chat is off.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
So the chat says disabled, and then when we tried to unmute ourselves, it was blocked. So thank you for letting us. But I don't think people can actually write in the chat right now.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
We have quite a few questions, if that's okay.
sure.
Okay, the first one was, I understood if you own the building, the percentages on what you're using for the food program, but if you own the building, will CACFP pay for a % of utilities, insurance, and the other expenses, internet that you mentioned, if you own it?
Yeah, I mean, you would still base, it would be a correct methodology to use that square footage to determine the percentage. It's not 100% allowable because you use those, those costs are for your daycare, it's other daycare related costs, but you could still use that same methodology to figure out the CACFP allowable amount.
Okay, and then we are all, I'm sure it's not just me, but we are all as an industry very short staffed. It's very difficult to hire people right now. And filling out the administrative and the other employees, it's not going to be what it needs to be because we are so short staffed.
So can we just put like new hire in the budget? Obviously we wouldn't have a name yet, but like if we want to hire 3 more employees,
I think that would be reasonable as long as you come back and adjust it as when it's filled. Because it's still a projected amount. It's in your budget as a projected amount that you plan to fill it, and you have an amount allocated to pay that person. So that would be reasonable as long as you come back and change it when you do hire.
Okay, and then the years that were selected, 2020 and this year, are so not normal because of COVID. 2020 was a disaster financially for all child care. And 2021 is still, we're in September, but it's still been a very difficult year. And I want the budget to be correct, but it might not be what you need it to be.
As long as we can see that you're a viable business, and if your doors are still open and however you're making ends meet, then that's what we need to see. And unfortunately for some people, that means they've had to go get loans, or they've luckily been able to get the PPP loans or things like that. That's what we need to see. By no means do we want to see that. We know you guys are struggling, but we just need to see how you're making sure your doors are staying open and stay afloat. That's the point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay. So if I'm going to switch over to look at some multi-sided specific forms. Actually, it's just one. So if you're just an independent daycare, you only have one site, you don't have to stay on unless you have any questions. And I say daycare, I've used that term too broadly. It's at risk. If you're just a single-sided independent institution, the rest of this really wouldn't apply to you. You're welcome to hop off. But otherwise, I'm going to go over to this sponsor application real quick. Okay. So really the only thing that's different for you guys is that you have the sponsor application where your budget is. And that's why earlier someone was like, why don't I have that? It's because it's in here. This hadn't changed for you guys. The budget for you guys has been like this, where it's broken down into the schedules. It remains the same as it always did. Nothing about that has changed. Now, you guys have additional things that you can count off, travel, things like that, because you guys are required to travel unless you're walking distance to your sites to conduct on-site monitoring. So unless you guys have any questions about the multi-sided application, I'm not really going to hone in on it. The other thing that applies to you guys and not independent is you still have to be in compliance with that 15% rule, with the exception of family daycare home sponsors. That doesn't apply to you. So for sponsors of centers, or basically any sponsor that's not a family daycare home, and when I say sponsor, that's anyone with more than one site, you can't use more than 15% of the CACFP funds to pay for your admin costs. So if you fill out all of Section A, Part A, and you go down here and you put in your projected revenue, and it comes down here and it says you're out of compliance, you've either got to increase your revenue, which is hard to do without just making it up, or you have to decrease your administrative costs. So you should start with decreasing your administrative costs. Somewhere you've got to go here and make it less. Part F for family daycare home sponsors. This is for family daycare homes only. You guys know about your 10% administrative funds carryover. Be prepared that the next several weeks, well, after we get past September, we start asking for your end of year report so we can calculate if you have a rollover or not. You guys do have this part 2. Hold on, let me see if I can go hack into some other application real quick. It will not let you go to page 2 if you've not completed it. Is there a family daycare home sponsor on that doesn't mind me using their application real quick? I see Tony. Tony, do you mind if I pull up yours and look at your page 2 of the application? Okay. How about you, Jalen? Are you on? Do you mind if I use yours real quick? Anybody? Is Denise on? Denise, Debbie. Something's wrong with our chat. Okay, Jalen just texted me. Thank you. That's weird. Okay, so if you guys have questions, I don't know what's going on. You want to poke at, when y'all go ask whatever her name is, see, tell her people can't chat. Yeah, tell her our chat's disabled. I know Leanne could. I don't know, guys. Maybe I broke it. Okay, well, I got permission, so we're gonna go look at this one real quick. Sorry. What did I do? Did I break it? It's saying the chat's disabled. Yeah, Jennifer and Leanne can see it, but everybody's been trying to chat. They say they can hear me, but they can't chat, so it's disabled. Okay, well, we're looking into that, I guess. Sorry, guys. Okay, so we're just gonna look real quick at page 2 of the application if it'll let me go. Okay. So while we're figuring out if we can get chat to work again, I'm gonna ramble on about this page 2 that's specific to family daycare homes. I mean, sponsors. And family daycare homes. Okay, section A is about record collection and fund disbursement. Describe your procedure for collecting records from each facility, showing number of children served each day, family size, income applications, and then if your family daycare home, about your tiering, determining eligibility. Be as specific as you can on this. This question applies to everyone. Not every part of the question applies to everyone because tiering only has to do with family daycare homes, but you all have to collect records. So we need to know how each facility is collecting those and how they're being maintained. It should be reflective of what you're really doing. When we come out and do a review, it should be reflective of that. And like I said, it's redundant. We're asking here again where all your records will be maintained and we'll have access to them, because not everybody has this form. So we asked that question on the VCA. Now we're asking it here. So you can just copy and paste what you put on that first VCA. We might end up taking this off for you guys since we're making everybody answer it on that VCA question on the very first one. Same thing for this one. A lot of these are redundant for you guys. We've been making you report this and not everyone else. So you just copy and paste what you put on your VCA. This right here, describe your system for dispersing CACFP reimbursement. So it is regulatory that once we give you your payment, you have 5 days to pay your sites. We don't have a whole lot of center sponsors or sponsors other than family daycare homes that actually do that. All of our family daycare homes, they get their lump sum and they have 5 days to pay them. No ifs, ands, or buts, you gotta pay them. But most of our other sponsors don't pay their sites directly. If you do, then that's how you have to answer this and just explain how you're making those payments. But if you're not paying your sites money, don't answer this question that way. You need to tell us what you're doing in lieu of. If you're incurring all the cost as a sponsor and providing the food, or if they have, charge cards for each center and you just pay the bills, or if you make all the meals and disperse the food, you need to be putting that here. Don't just answer the question how to answer the question says you have to answer. We need to know really how you're operating. Because if you say, well, we make payment within 5 days of receipt, then we're going to look to see that you actually paid your site. And if that's not happening, then that's a problem. Section B, nothing's changed about this, but your ethnic breakdown. I was hoping. Okay, I'm told it should be working again. So if you have questions, see if it works. Nothing changed about this. We just took off the reference about visual observation. Okay, great. Somebody confirmed it's working again. Sorry, guys. I thought it was awfully quiet. I know I had to have said something that didn't make sense. Okay. You're reporting your whole numbers. I think we're good now. Thank you. Yeah.
Click on that. It said chat off. Right there, the chat box where it has write message in the middle.
Really?
Yeah, it said it got switched. But anyway, it just turned it to everybody.
Okay.
So FYI, if it ever happens again.
All right. Sweet. This was one thing I was hoping that we could get done this year, but we just didn't get to it. That next year this would add it all up for you guys. So these numbers here should be the sum of all your site applications. Okay, so we got a couple of questions. Will our mandatory training? Will our mandatory training be recorded in our app by CACFP person, or do we need to self-report in that section on the app? In the application at the very bottom where you check it to say you've attended training, that you have to check that yourself. But I'll show you where your training records are shown on your application before we're done here. If you submitted the OMES No, if you've submitted a vendor form to OMES and you've not heard back from them, you're good. Either they haven't gotten to it yet and they will, and if they have questions, they'll get back with you, or it was fine and you're good. So if you've submitted it, you're fine. We have a list to check that and we'll move on. Back to the budget. If you are a school at risk, can you choose to just budget food and milk costs and all the other? Well, you really still have to report what it costs to operate the program. And that's where I say we're going to have to get creative on some of you for just a, you're running the middle daycare. It's a little easier to report those things. But when you're a school system that you're talking like millions of dollars, sometimes tribals, some of our really large community actions or food banks, it's going to be tough. So really what we want to focus on for things like you, Lindy, is that you're reporting what it costs to operate the food program. Okay, so get with me and Jennifer prior and we'll work with you. Question about the required training. It shows the date we did online trainings with the checkbox. Okay, so for the required training, if you attended a Zoom training, and we still have some in-person ones going. I don't know how much longer that'll last with the cases of COVID going up, but we still have several Zoom options for your required training. It takes her a week or so to get that moved over to where it has the check mark that you've attended. But keep in mind, if you have to attend at least 75% of the training. So if you're not checked and you question why it's not check marked, and I'll show you that so you can have a visual here in a minute. But if you feel like it should be checked and it's not, get with this. Sherry Osley is the one that takes care of that. If I operate my after school program on a rent by month basis at another building, no lease agreement, do I need to record that? Yes, somehow. You could still report it and just give us the total amount. And I would just report it for a year. But yeah, you would need to report that. Where do I find this recording? When we're done here, we'll get a recording back and we can email it out. So if you're interested in getting a recording of this, email me afterwards. And I'll email it to you. I'll give you all our email addresses, or if Jennifer, you want to type in all 4 of our email addresses. No, Lisa, you have to get yours. Okay. So we kind of went off track now that we could have our chat back. Okay, so ethnic breakdown, this one, nothing changed. You still have to add it all up and report them here, and hopefully next year we'll have it total for you. Same thing about this, nothing's changed. If you need help collecting that, refer to your census data or contact your school. Monitoring, so nothing is about this has changed either, but just don't let everything roll over every year and never update it, because sometimes you guys, it's changing. So we need to know your procedures for conducting pre-approval visits. And this is especially important for family daycare homes because it's just like, it seems to be more like providers coming on, so a revolving door. We've really got to work together to make sure we're communicating to our providers that once you've spoken with them, that they understand they need to figure out who they want to sign up with and that they're going to stick with it, because I know it's getting frustrating when you go to sign someone up after having talked to them and then now they've gone with someone else. So do a good job of communicating with them and explain how you do that. We need to keep in mind that we've got to have good recruiting etiquette, and I'm jumping ahead because it talks about recruiting down here. So anyway, describe how you conduct pre-approval visits. Then you have to tell us how you are doing your reviews. Are you doing 1 announced and 2 unannounced? Are you doing the review averaging? Most people are doing the 1 announced and 2 unannounced. Review averaging is for like, basically you still have to do 3, an average of 3. So if somebody needs some extra love, you're going to go out and see someone 4 times and somebody else just twice. I wouldn't recommend that, because if you do it, then you have to turn in a schedule and it's just far more complicated. If you need to give someone some extra attention and love, just go give them some extra attention and love. Like, they can be visited more than 3 times in a year. Now, if you are opting into the monitoring waiver, which I'll be sending new ones of that out very soon. I'm not going to send it out in a mass email because then it's only going to go to sponsors. We only want it to go to our multi-sided, because only multi-sided has to do monitoring reviews. So going to reach out to all of our multi-sited individually so we can make sure I get the right people. But we do have the monitoring waiver again this year. And it does have an open-ended deadline or expiration date. So whereas all the ones before and the one you most recently signed, it expires the last day of this month. The new one, it's until 30 days after the emergency is over, which is determined by the White House. So we opt, it's a national waiver, so everybody's eligible for it, but we have to track who's opting into it so that we know what we're looking for when we come out for a review. A monitoring waiver, you need to read it. It's not waiving the reviews. It's waiving the requirements that you have to go on site. So when you get it, you need to read it before you send it back with your information, because we've had some folks that have not done any monitoring reviews all year. And they were like, well, I did the waiver. It doesn't waive the reviews. It waives the requirement that you have to do them on site, okay? You still have to exhaust all efforts to do them and still try to do a meal review. That part has been waived. Like, it's hard to do a meal observation if you're not on site, but we've had some folks get pretty creative. We had lots of people doing FaceTime and Zoom calls while they're doing meals. You don't have to, but we're encouraging you to do the best you can. Okay, describe the timings of reviews so that they're not anticipated, which is kind of hard now, especially if you're doing all desk reviews. It's been hard for us, but we're doing desk reviews. You basically just got to reach out and say, hey, I need your records, and give them, by the end of the day or something to that effect. But I would add something in there about how you're making sure they're unpredictable during these COVID times when you're doing them off-site too. And then describe your recruitment policy and procedure. That's kind of what I was carrying on about before. We've got to have some etiquette about, and this really kind of only applies to family daycare homes, but sponsors that are pursuing new sites. Most of our sponsors of sites that aren't family daycare home, you pretty like a school, you're not going to add a new site. You're just, all of your sites are your schools. Are at risk, usually add sites pretty often, but it's not like you have different sponsors pursuing the same site. But you still have to have a policy for how you're doing that. Okay, so on-site monitoring. Nothing about this has changed. Make sure you get all your sites in there. This is something that should be updated as sites come and sites go. So it should be up to date as you're adding and removing sites. And then you have to make sure you're listing the required amount of full-time devoted monitors so that you are in compliance with the amount of monitors you have to have for the number of sites. It will do the calculations for you. You just got to enter it in. But make sure you understand that a monitor is a person that's actually doing the reviews. The responsibility of a monitor is, whether it's on-site or a desk review, you're actually reviewing records and doing the pre-approvals, things like that. It's not any other duty. There are lots of CACFP duties, but the persons listed here have to be specifically doing the monitoring duties. And then the last section is the training. Nothing has changed about this. You have to say yes. You are making sure these people are trained on that. I'm actually surprised it's a submit. Oh, it's not submitted yet. I was like, why? It should force you to submit it. You say, yes, I'm training all my people on these topics. You need to describe your training plans for the current fiscal year, and then list the the designated trainer position here. Not the person's name, but coordinator, the director, whoever will be doing the training. Okay, and then you submit your form. Any questions on that? I'm going to switch back real quick to not a real live application. Pop up. Okay, I'm going to show you real quick. Well, down here, I'm going to go back, sorry. Well, let me show you this first. You will see your training records at the bottom of your application. If you see it and there's no check mark, then it means you either didn't attend or you didn't attend at least 75%. We didn't give you credit. if you feel like neither of those things are true and it's not checked, then you need to reach out to me and I'll get you to the right hands of the person that can help you. But give it a week or two, because sometimes, especially when these larger classes that we have, it takes for a while to get all those attendants moved over. This on your checklist will only show the training records that are applicable for the current fiscal year. Whereas if you go to your business maintenance page, and this test account's only registered for one, it will show your lifetime of training records back to the beginning of when we started doing it online. No, uploaded documents, so we have to enter that training. No, you have to register for training in the training calendar. And once you register for training in the training calendar, it will appear like I've shown you. And then once you've attended and we get the roster, someone in our office will mark you as attended. So this won't appear until you register for training in the training calendar. Okay. And it is confusing because right now everything's virtual. So you have to register on our system and then you have to also register on Zoom. But make sure if you don't want any hassle, it doesn't mean we're not going to give you credit. It just means it's going to take us longer to hunt it down and find out who attended and all that. To make it easier, make sure you've registered in the training calendar and this appears at the bottom of your checklist. Uploaded documents, no, you'll send it to your person that's assigned to your application. So if you have any documents that need to be updated, added to, send it to your person that's listed here. Can you guys think of anything? Oh, I did make it where we could have site maintenance. Oops, dang it. I need to do that. Thank you guys for hanging on. This is taken. No, you will know if you log into your account right now. It'll say who the office person assigned to your, not necessarily just your application, but to your account. It'll say it right down here. So site maintenance for multi-sited people, as you might be aware, we've restricted access to this to everyone. So if you go in here and anything's wrong, and it needs to be updated, you're going to have to reach out to the person assigned to your account, which generally is going to be Jennifer Pryor or Karen Davis. They handle the multi-sited, primarily Karen Davis. And it needs to be updated there. But the most important thing I probably can tell you, aside from all these changes and what you need to do to make sure you're submitting a complete and accurate application, is that you have to actually remember to submit it. So until you click this button, we don't know you're ready for us to look at it. Yes, when we get the recording, I think since it seems like we have an overwhelming amount of people interested, I'll just have Kendra, our training person, just send an email with the link to everyone that registered today to simplify. Do all application questions need to go to the assigned? No, I mean, you guys can reach out to me. You can email still the CACFP email address we have. We have cacfp@sde.ok.gov, but it would be most efficient for you to email the person assigned to your application because they'll be the one approving it. So I would advise that. And if it's something that they're unsure of, they'll reach out to me or the appropriate person. Like I said, this is probably the most important, and well, it is the most important and the most overlooked step that folks get it done and then they forget to submit it. So I would hate for that to happen to you, because if it's not submitted by October 31st, you will not be eligible to claim. On the budget part, do we report gross income and the taxes paid by the employer if somebody asked, yes, on the budget, you do report the gross income and taxes paid by the employer. So let me go. Let me go back to where we can look at that. And that's what I was trying to explain to you here when I listed those 12 teachers or whatever. We list them, these are all expenses and salaries paid by the institution or the employer, but they're not going to carry over as a CACFP portion. And if we need an independent audit for over 750,000, what exactly are you having audited? Okay, so let me tell you this. If you're over $750,000 in federal funds only, and you've never had an outside audit before, don't worry. We have coordinated with an outside CPA, accounting agency, company to conduct those for us. So in the years that you will not be reviewed by us, you'll have a separate financial audit basically by this CPA accounting firm. So you don't need to worry. If you're already getting those, then you're fine and you're already accustomed to that process. We only have a few centers that really, they fall into that category, that they've never gotten one before and they go over that 750,000. And yes, it always looks so easy, but when you start, it's a much different, you'll get to it and you'll just be like, oh my gosh, what did she say? You're welcome to email me any questions, but like I said, I'd start with the person assigned your application because they're knowledgeable and they're responsible for approving your application. The one thing I didn't go over was the provider. And I'm just going to hop back real quick to a family daycare home. Provider applications, I'm using you again, Jalen. I hope that's okay. Nothing has changed about the provider applications except the same thing about Mealtimes, that it's changed for everyone else. So be mindful that any mealtime changes that are happening for August and September, we need to have that form, okay? If after you get approved for October and everything's approved and you're operating, then when Mealtimes need to be changed, we'll need the form for October then. But while your FY22 application sits in an unapproved status, we don't need it until after it's approved. And so when you click this button or you click delete, that's when you're going to get that message. So if you, in your FY21 application, you go in there right now to change a time for a provider, it's going to kick it out. And we're going to need that form, okay? Nothing else has changed for you guys. Any questions? Any? Okay, the training you are required to attend. Oops. Is the manual training, and it is a little confusing. I'm hoping we can get some updates to how our training calendar looks so that it actually looks like a calendar and not like a hot mess that it kind of is. So if you've not attended your training, family daycare homes, you guys are good. You've already had your training. For those of you otherwise, you need to go here and search for a date. If you see a name of a city in it, these are on site. So there is one, well, those are old. This is the one we're in right now. If it says the name of a city, it's on site, and that when you register, you will get information from the Zoom registration that will tell you where they'll be held. But you can look for one like we have that says Zoom. This is the next CACFP training manual workshop that is Zoom virtual only that will fulfill that training requirement if you don't want to go somewhere on site. And then I think we might have one in October as well, but the vast majority of these are on site at actual locations. You have to make sure you register here. And then once you do that, you'll get the registration information. It'll send you a Zoom link where you have to register there as well. And that's what I was trying to explain to you, that if you don't register here, then it's not going to show up at the bottom of your pages like I explained. And it's not that we're just going to leave someone high and dry if they didn't register correctly. It's just going to be a bigger hassle because we'll have to hunt down the records and find that you did attend. Anything else you guys can think of? Something else important to remember is that as your application is, after it's been submitted and it's being reviewed by the person assigned, if you're wondering the status and you come back and you see something like this, this should tell you like, oh, hey, something wasn't right. And you need to click on details. I say that. That's a bad form to put the example on because that one doesn't get unapproved, but pretend this was on some other form. If you see this check mark and and a date here, click on details and it tells you like, hey, something's not right. I need to go answer that. In previous training, you said we'd have to put enrollment number down on each provider. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, no, now I do. Okay. Family daycare homes. And yes, they did. And really, it's kind of stopped with us. Okay, so family daycare homes on the claim. Historically in the system, you've not had to report enrollment numbers each month, and we're going to make that change. It's not done yet, and you'll get plenty of fair warning that before we implement it so that you can fix your system. So if you do that file upload, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, then just close your ears. It doesn't apply to you. But for those of you that are family daycare homes and you use Minute Menu to do the file upload, that will be implemented where you have to put the enrollment number, but Minute Menu will have to get something from us first. So when the changes are made on our side, we'll get the template and we'll get it sent out to you all, and you can provide that. Somebody can provide it to Minute Menu to update your system. I think that's what your question was, Debbie. Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you guys that have sat on. I really cannot believe we've been on this long, but that's great. Any other questions? We will send out the recording to everyone. I'm going to have these trainings every first and third Tuesday. So if the recording doesn't help and you need more help, come back in a couple of weeks. Otherwise, you guys have a wonderful week and stay well. Thank you, everyone.